Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Dynamically Speaking live from Identiverse. It is the next day and we have David with us as always. And we have a special returning guest, Gerry Gebel.
Hey everyone.
So how are you this lovely Friday morning in Vegas?
I don't know. It's Friday morning, the end of the conference, so we're in survival mode at this point, I think. Is that fair?
It is fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm starting to lose my voice like way deeper than usual.
Yeah,
It's
mine's
not a good sign.
Mine's gone. So
Yeah. So we're gonna sign language this episode today.
Okay, that should be fun.
Yeah.
That'll work very well for the audio only part of this. So you both are speaking in a bit over an hour. What are you speaking about? Let's start there.
Wait a minute. When is this?
At 10:15.
Today?
Are you having a moment, Gerry? Do you want to talk about it?
Today?
Yes.
All right. Oh yeah. Okay. Fine.
So I'll go over the logistics and he'll go over the content. So 10:15, Breakers J, which is that way for those of you at Identiverse. And what are we talking about, Gerry? I kind of forgot.
Well, we're doing a shortened version of the auth-zen readout for the interop that we did for this conference. So that's super exciting.
Yep. You'll find this interesting, Emmy. We, as you know, we had a session on Tuesday, and it was a 40 or 50-minute session. I don't remember. And we had 20 alt slides plus demo. We're reusing the same material in a 20 or 25-minute session. And yeah, we're wondering how we can make it all fit.
I know. It'll be like watching YouTube on like 1.5 times speed.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll have to talk fast, and
We can do that.
yeah, we can do it. We
Like
can
those
do it.
tobacco bulk sellers in the market. You've never seen those?
No.
Like you go down to the Carolinas and they'll sell like, tobacco leaves by the ton or whatever unit it is. And they have people who speak. It's an auction and they speak so fast you just don't understand.
All right. We need some of that today.
Tobacco?
Yes.
Yeah, it's legal here.
Okay.
So what are we talking about then? You said auth-zen. What is auth-zen?
Well, it's an effort to standardize some of the APIs within the P*P complex of authorization systems. Primarily focusing on the PEP to PDP in communications right now. So that's really shaping up. It's coming together, and I think we'll be on track for 1.0 of this spec later this year.
Cool. So this is a spec that started, for those of you who don't know, started in earnest in June of 2023, right here in Las Vegas, a couple of hotels down on the Strip, with Gerry, with a lot of individuals involved in the authorization world from a wide range of vendors. Today in the interop we did for the binary API, we had 14 different policy decision points. So that shows a big adoption, right?
It is. And then we had another interop earlier this year in March at the Gartner show in London, where we also included a number of those vendors plus 8 API gateway vendors. So it really expands the universe of vendors out there that support the standard already.
Yep. And you mentioned P*P and PEP and PDP. So for those of you that don't know, there is an architecture in the world of authorization that we oftentimes call the P*P architecture or the ABAC architecture. And in that you have the policy enforcement point or PEP, the policy decision point or PDP, and the bulk of auth-zen is standardizing that interaction, like Gerry said, between PEP and PDP. And then in the architecture, we also have PIP, policy information point,
right?
And then we also have
the PAP,
testing
administration.
Yeah,
I remember this. You're the ones with the memory issue.
That's true. Did we already say PDP?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
And so, yes, policy administration point. What's interesting is that if you go look at NIST and their publications, you'll find 800-162 that you actually contributed to. You helped review. Yeah, I think you were in the acknowledgements of the spec. Don't be humble.
Well, I might have reviewed some of it, but I didn't write.
Oh, you didn't write it? No. It is in this document. So they define the architecture, and the Zero Trust spec that came out a few years later, 207, reuses that architecture. So it's nice to see that finally we're seeing adoption for that pattern.
Right, and you mentioned the information point. So that's potentially the subject of a future profile. Because we want to see where is the intersection of auth-zen with some of the work that Shared Signals is doing in CAPE, the continuous access evaluation protocol. So I think there's some really interesting possibilities there. And then also on the administration side, it's on our roadmap to talk about or profile how you can get a policy set from an administration system to the PDP and define an API for that. So lots more work to do, but
lots more work to do.
Yeah,
I think the shared signals piece, to me at least, is the most interesting, because it's going to open the world to not just runtime authorization, but let's call it reactive, that just in time detecting something changing and therefore triggering an authorization event.
Yeah, because we've always talked about this authorization architecture implementing real-time authorization, but that still can be somewhat stale, depending on the exact scenario. So integrating with a CAPE system will give you even more immediate updates to events that are of importance to different authorization systems.
Fresh authorization always,
right?
The freshest.
Yeah.
So that brings me to two things. Number one, the focus of the interop we did on Tuesday was not the binary API. So by the way, we kind of jumped all over. We got to mention that in the Auth0 APIs, we're defining 3 styles of APIs. The direct API, can I do this? And you reply yes or no. The search API, hey, tell me which records I can see, and you tell me the record IDs. And then the partial evaluation API, which is something that will not be part of 1.0. It's something that we're working on for the future, which is a similar question to search, but you get conditions or predicates back instead of the actual item. So these are the 3 APIs, right?
Right, and plus a discovery endpoint so that a PDP can advertise which of these different APIs that it supports. So that's similar to what? To the OIDC?
Yes, the OpenID Connect
right.
discovery endpoints. Yeah. And so today, the talk will focus on?
Well, on the search API, which is really cool.
Yep.
I think it's a pretty dynamic demo as far as demos go.
Yep.
Because you're returning the real data, as you said. We have different search parameters, if you will. We can search on subjects, on actions, and on resources, and get back the actual data. So if you have a given user or subject and an action, you want to know, okay, what records can Alice update? This return result set will actually show you that list of records. Or if you have, say, a sensitive record and you want to know, well, who can update this record, it'll give you the actual list of users that can do that function. So it's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty interesting demo.
And it is a net new, in the world of standards, it is a net new feature. If we look at the grandfather of all authorization standards, it might well be XACML or XACML. By the way, someone in a presentation said, I don't know how to pronounce XACML, so I just say whack-a-mole, and I thought of you. Reminded me of that slide you had back in the day.
Yeah. Who is it? Hal Lockhart he was one of the original editors, I think, of XACML.
And he's still there?
He's still around, right? Yep. But I think he has the authoritative definition for how do you say it.
Okay.
It's either XACML with a Z or XACML, like exactly. And there might be one other.
XACML, just
spell it out.
Yeah, spell it out.
It's good to know that, right?
Yeah, because then you know what it stands for.
You do.
So the person yesterday was doing a presentation on Zero Trust and explaining how the PSRP architecture fits in there, and so he brought up whack-a-mole. Made me think of you.
Yeah. One other thing, David.
Yep.
With regard to the demo, what's really also so powerful is there's a drop-down list of which vendor's PDP you're going to send that search API to, or that request.
Correct.
And so you can just toggle between them, right? You can pick Axiomatics, you'll get a result set. Then you can select WSO2, Servos or Topaz, and you get the exact same result set. It's really cool to see that. That's the real power of the interoperability we're trying to achieve here.
And I'll go further. Some of the products in the interop, I think there's 9 this time around.
Yes.
But there were 14 in the original. Some of them are policy-based, like Axiomatics. Some of them are graph-based. Some of them are ACL-based. And that's okay. It doesn't matter how you do it behind the scenes, because now you have the interface to interact with.
That's right. I think Amr Gazit, he describes this as stateful PDPs versus stateless.
Yep.
And we had a nice mix of those implementations in this interop, which is it's quite the challenge.
Yep. And speaking of stateless PDPs, so if we go back to the grandfather of standards, XACML, it is biased towards stateless PDPs, and to have the concept of a PIP. And so within XACML, there is no search API because, in a way, back then they couldn't. It just didn't fit in the model. So achieving Auth0 search API functionality is a net new thing. This is great. This is a mini revolution in the world of authorization. And that's
right. Well, I think it brings the capabilities of the authorization system closer to the business functionality you're trying to support.
Yep.
And so I think that's a good step forward.
Yep. It's amazing. So Gerry, switching gears for a couple seconds, you and I worked for a long time together, 10 years. You and I joined Axiomatics within weeks of each other.
No, David, you always remind me that you started at Axiomatics first.
Yes, I was there first. I also left first.
Well, that's true, yeah. But you were there, yes, a few weeks before me, back in 2010.
Yeah,
so
back in 2010.
Right.
We first met in San Francisco.
Yeah, shortly after that.
Yep.
Was that at RSA conference or later on? I think it was later on.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I've only been in one RSA. It's I'd love to go back. But anyway, so you and I, worked on authorization for the longest time, and then you switched to a company called Strata. Can you tell us what Strata is and how you're involved in AuthZen, by the way? Because you're involved in Strata, and you first took the head of standards role over there, and now you're overseeing all products, right?
Right. So when I first started at Strata, my main goal was to bring this new idea around a vendor-neutral policy language to life. It's called IDQL, or Identity Query Language, and the idea was that there are so many different policy implementations out there, or just homegrown systems, and no way to represent that in a common neutral format. And so that was the idea behind that. And then there's also an open source project called Hexa, which is designed to translate that neutral format, IDQL, into the bespoke format of any target system. And so that's a CNCF sandbox project. There's a number of connectors or providers, as we call them, to convert IDQL to and from something like the Cedar policy language that Amazon introduced not too long ago.
Do you support the translation Cedar already?
Yes.
Nice. And Rego as well?
Well, there's 3 ways that we have found that we can translate or map to different formats. One is just mapping to a basic role or group model, because there's no policy structure there, right? It's just groups and roles.
In Rego, you mean?
No.
Or in IDQL?
Just generically, right?
Okay.
But we can map that to an IDQL format.
Yep.
But there's no policy language on the role side or the group side, right? It's just a list of groups in a directory. So we can map that simple model into actual policy. The second is the full interpretation, like with Cedar. So we have full fidelity going back and forth from IDQL to Cedar and vice versa. And then the third way was when we came up with when we looked at Rego and OPA, because Rego basically is a programming language, and we briefly looked at, okay, can we make a translator that goes back and forth, and said, no, this is way beyond what we want to do. But in our research, we found some other projects that did interesting things with interpreting the input JSON capability of OPA. And what we did was we wrote a small bit of Hexa OPA code, Hexa Rego code, sorry, that directly interprets the IDQL JSON format. So we basically ship the policy and the request, and the Hexa Rego code can do the evaluation. So we call this direct interpretation, because it's not really translating.
Right.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you do have a Rego policy, but it's a wrapper around the native IDQL policy.
Yeah, essentially.
That's interesting.
Yeah, essentially. So that's been a really interesting project. And then a little over a year ago, I also now manage the Strata products, which is around identity orchestration. So this is, a middleware or abstraction between your applications and your identity infrastructure, primarily IDPs and attribute sources.
Yep.
That gives you a lot of flexibility to do unified single sign-on, help you rationalize your IDP inventory of products. And we introduced something really interesting last year.
We have a guest.
This is serious.
All right, for those of you live, we have a guest crashing the podcast. Hello, little robot.
Is this part of the NHI pavilion from the show floor?
It probably is, yeah.
All right, that's a first.
Can the vacuum robot cleaner take part in the podcast? Permit denied.
Yeah, well, it's on its own.
Yeah,
it's coming back.
This is strange.
That's all right. So anyway,
sorry, Gerry.
That's okay. Was I saying? Oh, we introduced that capability last year around identity resiliency. There's more and more focus on continuity of operations in different contexts, and so we can do that for identity. If your primary IDP fails, we can automatically switch over to an alternate because we're doing health monitoring of the environment, and since we're that abstraction in the midst, we can do that, and you can continue operating your critical business apps, even if your primary IDP goes down.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The first part of what you do at Strata, it kind of reminds me in a way of Zen, because you're bridging the different identity protocols and identity stores and providing that one single unified experience. It's quite similar to Zen and providing a standardized authorization interface.
Right. Well, I guess you asked what's the relationship with Zen, right?
Yep.
Why am I doing that? And I guess it goes back a long way to when I was back at Burton Group. I did a lot of reports on standards at the time, SAML, WSFed, all the federation standards.
SPIML as well?
No, I didn't do that one. Mark Diodati covered that one, but also XACTWL. And we hosted a number of interoperability demos at the Burton Catalyst Conference over the years, right? So I was always interested in that. Actually, we hosted the first XACTWL interop ever as well.
I'd like to say I remember that was before my time.
It was before your time.
Yep.
So yeah, it's always been, I don't know, a hobby of mine or interest area of mine. And in talking with Alan Foster, actually it goes back 3 years ago. We first got a meeting together here. It didn't really go anywhere until 2 years ago.
Yep.
But he also had some similar ideas that there's got to be something we can do here to promote or enable interoperability, and so that's where the interest is in me getting involved.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks. That takes me to another point. That a question that we've been asked quite a few times when we present Zen, and it is: are you going to standardize the implementation, how you do authorization? Are you going to choose a policy language and that's going to be it? And the answer is
maybe. I know you say no.
You say maybe. Breaking news.
No. I think there's more to discuss there, because we did talk about earlier about if I have a policy administration interface and I'm creating some policy in some language, and then we're going to in Zen we're going to specify the API for how you distribute that to a PDP. What about if I'm supporting multiple vendor PDPs? I mean, how am I going to handle that? So I think we're going to talk in the future about, okay, how do we translate that? And that's where the open source Hexa project could come into play. But I think so part of the answer is no. We're not going to say, here's an industry single policy language that we all should support, because I just think that's a non-starter. But I do think there is some additional discussion about, okay, how do we make this practical?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is that fair?
Yes, and I totally agree. I had the opportunity to talk to Martin Kupinger back in right after EIC, actually, and then also Homan Farmand of Gartner back in March, and they both told me similar things. They said, "Oh, policy orchestration is going to be the next big deal," and that made me think of IDQL, right? So the whole idea is that PDPs are commoditized, right? You should be able to use to some degree, right? There's some subtle differences, but they're more or less commoditized. So when you go as a practitioner, when you go buy an authorization solution, a PDP, you're going to check the box that it performs well and so on and so forth, that it does do the use cases you're interested in. But then the biggest thing is really the PAP, the control plane, like how you do collaboration. And then what's going to happen, and we see this with our customers, at some point our customers are going to say, well, it's all fine and well that you do Alpha and XACTWL, but we also have a bit of Open Policy Agent over there. Can you help us manage that? So yeah, I think policy orchestration, policy translation, whether through IDQL or directly, that's probably going to be a big deal. And maybe that's what we can actually recommend in Zen, that translation orchestration approach.
Right. And I think there's another aspect to that as well. So you talked about managing a runtime authorization system or set of systems, but there's also the governance aspect of that. Governance from the perspective of validating or reviewing who has access, and supplementing like the IGA tools and what they do, which is more user focused, if you will, but not really not really having the visibility into the deeper access controls of business applications. So I think there's a lot more in that sort of governance area that we can support as well.
And perhaps the search API can be the foundation for
that would be huge.
access review and user recertification.
And just general reporting, right? Just being able to support ad hoc queries that your audit team may want to have, or your CISO team may want to have available.
That takes me to another point, which is the design patterns. Early on in the life of Auth0 we started working on authorization design patterns. I think we need so it kind of got paused because of the API work, but we need to bring it back. We need to tell practitioners, this is how you would do authorization in this case, in that case, because there's not just one single pattern. And speaking back to governance, we need to think about what that looks like, because people are used to doing user recertification, access recertification a la SailPoint, a la IGA, right? But policy is a little different, or is it? Can we do the recertification, plug into an IGA product, and we're done? Do we need to do something additional? What will the standards play? Will it be through the search API? So these are some of the things that we probably need to define in the design patterns.
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot going through the exercise of defining these APIs. We started working on the design patterns document early on. I think especially Alex and Eve and some of the others on the working group. And I think it was right to pause it at that time, because I think now we can go back with sort of more recent experiences and really flesh that out. I'm losing my voice. You're gonna have to be solo on the session later this morning.
I'll go super fast then. I'll go like on your slides. I'll be Gerry would talk to this, but I don't know what it is. Just move on.
We'll make it.
One more thing I'd like to get your thoughts on. Is I've been toying with this whole idea. I probably told you this. Then I'm forgetful. So, what's your name again? This idea of comprehensive pragmatic authorization, right? And I'm partly inspired by what Atul and Ian are doing as well over at Signal. It's the whole idea that the PEP PDP does not always work. You might have a SaaS that you just cannot front with a PEP. So then what do? Well, I have this idea that potentially you could do token-based authorization, where you manipulate the token, you enrich it with claims that come from a policy, or even potentially provisioning, intelligent provisioning from the same policy, right? You start with the same alpha, DACL, Cedar policy, and then you convert it into whatever the target system understands. What's your take on that?
Well, I think this is also where the search mechanisms really come into the forefront. Because you talk about token enrichment, or just minting that accurate token for that session for that user. If we do that based on policy, then I think that authorization token, if you will, is more precise, and you can sort of control access from the outside, right? Because, like you said, it's a black box basically. That app is not available to you. So I think those kinds of scenarios are really where the search APIs will shine, I think.
Awesome. Oh, absolutely. It does. I think they're a good way to, and this is where we might realize we need another search API that is focused on claims generation, for instance. We'll see.
Well, I think we talked about whether that's just a profile, not necessarily an API, or do you think it's a separate API?
So let's see if profile is enough. But I wonder whether we need to be able to ask more pointed questions in the search API that are not supported by the existing interface.
I understand now. But because on the working group, we did talk about having some, whether it's a profile or a different API for IDPs, right? For identity providers who are the primary minters or enhancers of those tokens, so that they can be part of the Auth0 universe as well. And also, that would help us to expose that policy, from the IDP, because that's all proprietary. I don't know that there's any policy language that any of them support. Is that right?
I don't think so. I mean, those IDPs that do have policy language support, they have it in other products. I'm thinking of Ping, for instance. They have Ping authorized, but it's not the IDP side of Ping, right? Microsoft have conditional access policy, but it's not an authorization language. So
I think it furthers that idea of enhancing the governance of our identity infrastructure.
But to go back to the claims generation, I think that the sort of question we'd want to ask is, tell me what Alice can do, So the only thing we know is Alice, but we don't know the resource type. So we need a broader question than just the one we have. Because right now in AuthZen, we only have one unknown and 2 set items.
Right. Otherwise, we'd have to issue multiple API calls to get the full set.
But maybe that's the pattern. Maybe that's the way.
Right. Okay.
We'll have to see.
More to come.
More to come. So that will be the next wave for us in the AuthZen world, right? One is get the IDPs on board, which they're more or less are already on board indirectly, because a lot of the people we work with work at IDP companies. Right. So that's one thing. The other thing is getting SaaS and COTS on board, telling the Workdays of this world, hey, it's time you actually let your customers externalize authorization to a PDP through AuthZen so that it's workable. The OAuth moment of authorization, right? So what can people do to help us?
Yeah, I think that's an area where, those of you that are in customer enterprise environments, when you're putting out your RFPs for new products, new capabilities, that's where you can say, well, we need support for AuthZen in these scenarios. And I think that's where the demand really can be most powerful. It's one thing for, the vendors that are in identity to support these APIs, but it's really more beneficial if the broader application world is adopting these APIs.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's going to be the proof in the pudding, right? When you see adoption.
Yes, indeed.
Great. Thanks.
That's it.
Yeah. We can go on and on and on. What are your hobbies? What do you do when you don't talk about authorization?
Well, I do lots of things like woodworking, sourdough baking, pizza making, all those kinds of things. Yeah. We have fun.
Amongst other things, Gerry's quite the accomplished chef. So every time I go to, I haven't been to your place in ages because we live so far apart. But last time we had quite a feast.
That was awesome. Yeah, it was, I think, over Thanksgiving weekend. Right? You and your wife Dell.
Yep.
That was amazing.
I think we got snowed in.
Or not Arizona,
not the Arizona side. Chicago got snowed in, so we were delayed. We couldn't go home.
That's right. That's okay though.
The truth is, I called the airline. I was like, "Do whatever it takes. We're staying one extra day."
That's awesome. Well, thanks for having me again.
You bet. Thanks.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Emmy. Any final words, Emmy? Any questions for Gerry? Anything you want to ask the legend?
Please.
Well, I mean, besides getting all the dirt on you.
Wow. Oh wow. Okay, I'm going to walk myself out.
Awesome. Thank you both.
All right. And before we cut it short, so our session is at 10:15, Breakers J. And before that, I need to look it up. Alex Babineau is also going to be talking about authorization. So let me pull up the details. He needs all the hecklers he can get.
Well, also, Alex Olivier has a session.
During hours.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
We'll give them the same room, right? Breakers J.
Oh, yeah. So Alex Olivier, Breakers J. So Alex Olivier, who's one of the founders of Cerbos and one of the members of the AuthZen working group. And so let me get you the details for these 2 sessions. This is where you do tap dancing.
Right. Da, 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 da.
All right, so Mendeley Bay H for Alex Babineau's presentation at 9:40 on the hidden risks of GraphQL. And the rise of WASM embeddable policy decision points, transforming enterprise authorization. That's with Mike Schwartz of Glue and Alex Olivier of Cerbos in Breakers L. That's going to be interesting, actually. It's just maybe one final, because I can never stop. For the longest time, we've said in the PSRP architecture that you need to do authorization on the server side, which is true. Always do server-side validation. It's like one of the basic principles of OWASP. What Alex Olivier is saying is, yes, but it shouldn't stop you from doing some basic validation on the front end. And that's more what I sometimes call usability or safety, although it makes safety sound like it's something you can do optionally.
Or personalizing.
Personalization, yeah. So it brings authorization closer to the user, not for the sake of final enforcement, but for the sake of delivering an experience that corresponds to what the user is looking for. So really cool idea.
Yeah, it's just also demonstrate the amazing range of sessions here at Identiverse this week, and it's always great to see all that, and that they're recorded. So
yes, just the sound, just the audio.
Right. But you can't be on all the sessions that you want to, so it's great to go back and listen to those afterwards.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks again, Gerry. Take 2.
All right.
Oh, by the way. Okay.
Back to you, Emma, before he starts again.
I'm gonna say. Okay. Thanks for watching this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.